to infinity and beyond.
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No, I am your father.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Owens here with Johnny Sobchak for another episode today. We are talking about the latest horror film to hit theaters. We're talking Scream. We're talking Euphoria, recapping the first two episodes. We're talking the latest news, what we've been up to, and it's going to be a great, very insightful episode. Johnny, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well, enjoying my snow day holiday weekend here. And
what a combination.
Yeah, the timing lined up very well. So I'm in a pretty good mood, pretty fortunate setting at the moment. And that includes going to the movie theater for the first time this year to see the new Scream, which I guess wasn't really anticipating like seeing it. Like I wasn't really thinking about it or having it on my mind like this early in the year. I mean, we're already halfway through January, so we're moving right along, but it was nice to get into the theater and see something with a good audience, and it was better than I think I maybe even expected it to be. So but we'll get to into more of that later on. But yeah, good times, and some exciting and interesting news to talk about as well.
Definitely. I also got to check out Scream in the theater, and like you, was very impressed with, I don't know what I was necessarily expecting, but it exceeded that. So it was a good time to get in the theater. We'll dive into that. Like I said, we are talking about some new trailer releases in a bit here. We're going to talk about the first couple episodes of Euphoria, and then we will review Scream. So it's going to be a great episode as always. But first off, we've got to remind you to subscribe to our newsletter, The Rewind. Have everything packaged up and delivered into your inbox once a week as we share our latest news, our latest reviews, videos, interviews. Everything that we do will be sent straight to you. And that's also where you will hear first about all of our giveaways, which we are running right now at this moment. A giveaway for Last Night in Soho, Edgar Wright's horror thriller movie from last October. We are giving away a Blu-ray copy, and you can find that on our Twitter and in the newsletter. All you have to do to enter is follow us, retweet and like the post, and subscribe to the newsletter. So if you haven't done it yet, go ahead and do that, and we will be announcing a winner this Friday. So there's still a few days to get into that. But other than that, Johnny, I know you kind of touched on it. Movie theater, snow day. What else has been going on for you?
Yeah, so of course Euphoria, as you pointed out, Scream, snow day, but we also, my girlfriend and I, we watched Atlanta. We finished the first two seasons, which have been out for a few years now at this point. But we are getting ready and are excited for the premiere of season 3, which is dated for March 24th, I believe, on FX. So lots of TV watching, but we snuck in some movies as well, including I Saw the Devil. We watched that last night after Euphoria, and it's a Korean film from 2010. It's like a horror action hybrid, like thriller, and it is really pretty unique. Like I can't really think of like anything really specifically that kind of fits the mold, but it's not quite as scary as something like The Wailing, which I think I might have talked about back when we watched that a couple months ago. But it's still very dark and violent and gruesome, and I don't want to go into too many specifics, because if you don't know about the premise, I would go in as blindly as possible, but it's on Amazon Prime Video right now. So once I saw it was on there. It's been on my watch list for a long time, and I've been like, looking forward to it. I'm trying to watch more, international films, non-English films. So that was a cool little thing to throw on. And again, it's pretty nuts. It was very entertaining. And I definitely recommend giving it a look. Be warned, it is not for what I would say is like the faint of heart. It's very, very violent and pretty intense and a visceral watch. So maybe not the most casual watch for most people, but yeah, something I just threw on after Euphoria last night to switch up the vibes.
Euphoria is pretty, even though it's switching up the vibes, Euphoria is pretty intense. It's pretty visceral. So I guess there's a somewhat of a segue there.
Yeah.
Well, I, like you, had been very much on my TV grind. I know you snuck in more movies than I did, but saw Scream in the theaters, which again, we're getting to it. Hold your horses. But on the TV front, I have been spread across quite a few different shows here. I know I mentioned last week How I Met Your Father. That premieres, by the time you're listening to this, it will be premiering today on Tuesday, January 18th, 2 episodes on Hulu. And I got to check out the first 4. So we have our full video spoiler-free review of the first 4 episodes on YouTube. You can find it's about 10 to 12 minutes. And I'm breaking down everything you need to know about the show, how it connects to How I Met Your Mother, whether it's worth watching or not. And it's it's something that I want to be able to do more this year with as we kind of expand further into video content on top of just doing interviews. I want to be able to kind of put me and Johnny's beautiful faces in front of you instead of just our lovely voices. So head on over to YouTube. You can check out the full review. I'm not going to spoil it here. You'll have to go and check it out on YouTube to see that. But beyond How I Met Your Father, I am also checking out a show called The After Party, which comes out on Apple TV Plus at the end of the month on January 28th. 3 episodes in there, and it's I mentioned it last week, so I won't go too far into it, but the official embargo for the first 3 episodes lifts on Tuesday of this week. So I wanted to go ahead and give a little bit more in-depth look at it. But you've got a solid comedy cast here, and it's like it's like a lot of different things: comedy, mystery, drama. But it's Lord and Miller. I know I mentioned that when I was talking about it last week. So you're in good hands there. And the first 2 episodes, I was a little like, okay, we're easing into this. But the third one that I watched last night, it's Ben Schwartz, who's John Ralphio from Parks and Rec. He voices Sonic. And like each episode kind of focuses on a different character and recounts the night of the murder from their perspective. And so the 3rd episode was his episode, and it was like 3 times better than everybody else's so far. So I'm very excited. I'm hoping that like this is like the blast off point, and that's why they're releasing 3 episodes together. They're releasing that, like, the embargo is for these 3, that like this is the one to like kick it off to the next level. So I'm enjoying it so far. Really excited to keep going there and find out who done it. But weekly Book of Boba Fett update, still grinding through that. We're 3 chapters deep, and it's been pretty steady as far as like my middle of the road analysis. I keep saying that I'm hoping that it gets better, and I had said previously that I heard that it was supposed to get absolutely crazy. Still waiting on that to happen. We did get a little Danny Trejo action. He was in there as a side character. So Machete himself was in the Star Wars universe now, which was an interesting thing to see. But I think my favorite, outside of Euphoria, which we'll talk about after I finish giving my recaps here, was Peacemaker, which hit HBO Max this past week with 3 episodes. The John Cena, James Gunn spinoff of the Suicide Squad from last year. I won't talk too much about it because, Johnny, I know you haven't caught up with it yet, so I don't want to spoil anything because it's very good. But I'm a big fan. It's a lot of fun. It channels that same like the Suicide Squad humor, action, violence, intensity. But it's like, I said this to you a second ago before we started recording, it's kind of dumber almost, but I mean that in like a very good way, because it's like you don't have like Harley Quinn there, or like the other characters, to Deadshot, to kind of like keep everybody. Am I mixing that up here? Deadshot, that was Idris Elba, right? Or was that Will Smith?
Deadshot is Will Smith.
Okay, what was Idris Elba's character's name?
Bloodsport.
Bloodsport. Okay, Bloodsport. You don't have like those other characters to kind of like make it a little bit more serious. It's just all John Cena and Peacemaker and his like idiocy. But I mean that in like a very endearing way, because it's a lot of fun. It's silly, but it's also pretty intense and like compelling. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. We got 3 episodes of that, and now it'll release weekly on HBO Max for the remainder of the season. So I'm excited to continue to follow that and see where it goes. I know James Gunn said he wants to do a second season as well. So that's exciting to know that he's already like that we knew he was invested in the character because he made a freaking spin-off show of it. But to have him want to keep going with it, it must mean that we're going to get a pretty solid rest of the season. But also started the show Righteous Gemstones on HBO Max. Pretty solid comedy. I know the second season is airing now, so I wanted to catch up. So I am spread thin across multiple TV shows at the moment, but the biggest of those is Euphoria. Johnny, I know we're 2 episodes deep. We watched the second one last night after a what you and I both described as a really solid, fantastic welcome back in the season 2 premiere. Now we're kind of, those initial pieces have fallen and we're moving forward. What are your thoughts on the season so far?
Yeah, so I think it's off to a great start. I think the first episode was definitely it was just such a banger. I mean, it really kind of brought everyone back together, and crossing different storylines to set up new conflicts. Looking forward to this season. And it would just technically, again, Euphoria is a show that I think everyone would agree is pretty amazingly made in a lot of ways, whether you're talking about the cinematography or the use of music, the editing, camera movements, etc. So it was just technically impressive, but also I think it kept everyone on the edge of their seats, and especially the Cassie stuff, the whole bathroom situation, I think is one of the more memorable and memeable, so as we've seen so far on Twitter in the last week, scenes of the show and moments on the show. So I think that was a good set piece almost. And then the way it concluded, of course, with Fez attacking and hospitalizing Nate was a welcome sight for most people, as violent as it was. And then, of course, episode 2, slowing things down a little bit, kind of just getting inside the headspace of a lot of the characters, including Cassie, Nate, Maddie, and then again pushing things forward. We're looking at the relationship developing potentially between Fez and Lexi, which I think is one of the most powerful ships that I've seen develop on social media. On board. Yeah, in a while, for anything. So that I'm definitely all on board with that. And then, of course, we also have this kind of almost secretive love triangle developing between Nate, Cassie, and Maddie. And then another almost, I don't want to call it a love triangle because there doesn't seem to be a necessarily romantic or sexual connection between Rue and Elliot to this point, but there is a lot of deception and secrecy going on between Rue and Jules, who are now in a relationship, and Rue hanging out and like developing this friendship relationship with Elliot, which is Dominic Fike's new character on the show for this season. So there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. Some people getting a little bit more shine than others. I think a lot of people are fans of Cassie and Sydney Sweeney's like interpretation of that character. And then of course we have I think Maddie is kind of she is getting a little more interesting because she has to kind of navigate. There's this kind of subplot. I don't know where this babysitting thing is going, but that was a very strange and interesting moment on episode 2 last night. And then she also has this relationship with Jules, which we got a little bit more insight to. They went bowling in the second episode, along with the
With
couple.
Kat.
What the hell is their name? Kat, and then her boyfriend Ethan, I think is his name. Then there's a weird subplot going on with them as well, where Kat is not really being fulfilled, it seems like, by Ethan, even though he seems like a great guy and she says that he's great. There's definitely a few episodes left in this season. We're just getting started, so hard to say where it's going to go and if it's all going to pay off or be interesting all the way to the end. But I've heard some pretty good things for the most part. It seems like for season 2, whether or not it can live up to season 1, which I think everyone loved for the most part and thought was really great and interesting, it's going to be hard. I would say the one thing so far that I can say, not necessarily an improvement over the first season, because I love the first season, but I think the acting so far in this season from just these 2 episodes, I feel like you can feel at least a little bit of growth for most of the cast members. I feel like they're just as good, but better in some ways than they were in the first season, especially Sydney Sweeney. I think, again, she's getting a lot more screen time. Even Zendaya, I think in some parts seems like she's getting more confident and like more capable and comfortable, like in the role maybe. And even Hunter Schafer, again, this is kind of her first and only major role so far, and she's getting stronger as well. So and that kind of stays true across most of the cast, I think. The guy that plays Fezco, I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now.
Angus Cloud.
That's right. He is obviously crushing it and becoming
King.
quickly a fan favorite, if not the fan favorite. Maud Apatow is getting more shine as well, and she's very likable. So yeah, I'm really liking it. Hard to say where this is all going again and what's going to happen. One key subplot, the last thing I'll comment on that kind of popped off at the end of episode 2 is with regards to Nate's dad. He's getting more involved, and he is really it has precipitated from this attack on Nate, and he wants to kind of get, I don't know if retribution necessarily against Fez for doing it, but he at least wanted to know who it was and like get down to the bottom of it with Nate. Right. And now Nate has kind of twisted the tables on his dad, but he did call his dad out for fucking his illegal sexual activities with Jules, which happened in, I can't remember if that was the first episode of the first season. Yeah. So very early on, now it's coming back around. And then of course there's the video recordings. So his dad is in a deep, pit when it comes to illegal activity and what he could go down for. And Nate, of course, knows that and is holding that over him. And now as the episode concludes, his dad is like getting kind of desperate, getting kind of nervous. So we'll see what that power dynamic is like. I don't know what Nate is.
The one time that I've
character.
Yeah, I was gonna say the only person that's like more despicable on this show than Nate is his dad.
Right?
So it was like the one time that I was like,
yeah,
okay, Nate, I like you now. When
exactly.
he just like he didn't beat around the bush like he sometimes has done, like being intimidated by his father, but he just like went right at him when he was waiting in his room, and basically presented him with what he knows and how much power he now has over him. But yeah. I really the first episode, like you said, was fantastic. I thought the first episode was better than the second, but I still like loved the second episode. So that's not like a slight on the second. I just thought the first one was so great with like the party and just everything that was like, it was very much like a centralized episode. And then the second one, it kept jumping around. It was like equally compelling, but the way it kept like, okay, now here's 15 minutes happening in this location, and then like here's what was happening at the same time in this location. And it was really cool to see them kind of like go through all of these characters and like what was happening all at the same time to like lead to the next events. But just in general, from season 1 to season 2, you mentioned the Jules and Maddie connection, and I think it's so cool that all of the characters, like in the first season, there was very much like an us versus them kind of thing. But now it seems like at least all of the women are like together, like Jules is friends with Maddie now, which isn't something that we thought we saw. Jules and Kat had always been friends, but then like obviously Maddie and Cassie are tight, and then like with Lexi being Cassie's sister, she's in there, and then Rue is in there. So it's cool to see them all, like, basically everyone is friends now except for Nate, who's kind of like on the periphery, but like has his own individual things with a couple people. But I think it's been fantastic through these first 2 episodes. To obviously Fez was such a beloved character in season 1, and people were so upset that we never got like because you remember in season 1 it was like each episode was like a character's episode, and it was like telling their backstory, and people wanted that Fez backstory. And then of course season 2 opens with Fezco is the first word, and it's talking about him and Ashtray and his grandma. But the decision to make Fez a major player this time around, and Lexi as well, like Maud Apatow didn't really have much to do at all last season. She was there and was like had a couple moments, but I've really enjoyed seeing her step up and be a bigger part here. And it was just heartbreaking when she finally decided to have confidence, believe in herself, and went to the store, and then just was immediately like shattered. Not even like Fez was so excited to see her when he was like, Lexi Howard, what are you doing here? But just like the presence of that other girl, like that crackhead woman who has no, like Fez is just like taking care of her because he's like a good person. But just the presence of her threw Lexi off so much, and she got the wrong impression, and it was just devastating. But I am fully on board the ship that you mentioned for Lexi and Fez. I really want to see that happen, and I feel like it's, knowing this show, it's setting us up for like heartbreak. But
yeah,
we'll see.
I'm scared.
But the first 2 episodes have been fantastic. I don't have any reason not to believe that it won't continue based on everything that we had 8 episodes last season, then 2 standalones, and now 2 here. So we're 12 episodes deep, and it's shooting 100% right now. So I am thrilled for every Sunday between now and whenever season 2 ends.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a nice, again, I think we mentioned this before, but it's just nice after Succession was so great and went on for, a couple months there, to have another Sunday night, top tier show from HBO to everyone to tune in and talk about and get memes all week. And it's just nice to have that. And that's, again, I know everyone was on that binge model for the longest time, still in some regards.
Week to week is the way to go.
But week to week, there's just something different, especially if the show is as good as some of these shows are, on HBO in particular. My fondest memories of watching television, I think, ever is probably Game of Thrones. And that was the week to week theorizing with regards to scale or popularity or all that goes into Game of Thrones from a world standpoint. But it's that same kind of communal feeling. And I think that's really nice, especially right now, I think, in the pandemic, and just being able to build that up. And I think it's good for the show. I think it bodes well for the show from a fandom and kind of long-term standpoint.
Agreed, 100%. Knowing that at 9:00 on a Sunday, when 9:00 rolls around, you're watching Succession, you're watching Euphoria, you're watching Thrones. HBO just gets it with these weekly releases. So it's nice to know that that's what everybody's watching, that's what everybody's tweeting about, even during the NFL playoffs. I know it wasn't necessarily a close game last night, but I even if it was a close game, I was still watching Euphoria over the playoffs. So we are excited to see where the season continues. But shall we get into some news for the week? Not much news, but a couple interesting trailers to talk about.
Let's do it.
First up, we have a new movie from A24, our first trailer for X. Just a simple title there. But it's fun that we are talking about this because it stars Jenna Ortega, who is one of the stars of Scream. So we got the first trailer for it this week. At a secluded farmhouse in Texas, a film crew arrives to shoot an adult film. Their hosts, a reclusive elderly couple, take a special interest in their young guests. As night falls, the couple's leering interests turn violent. So it's a horror movie. It's a thriller. It's a I guess I would say it's probably just like a straight up slasher, but in the words of our character Tara from Scream, it seems like elevated horror, not just like a blood and guts kind of thing. What were your thoughts on the trailer here?
I don't know. I think I would disagree with you. Honestly, I mean, it's hard to gauge because it's just a small look at the film. But it seems like a throwback to that classic horror slasher. Yeah, no, almost like it has like a grindhouse look to it as well. Not really sure what to make of it, other than it definitely is giving off strong Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes. It seems like there may be some sort of supernatural element to it as well. Again, hard to say. I do like the cast a lot. I think that's really the main thing that has me interested. Other than the style of it, which looks pretty unique, or at least unique for contemporary horror. Mia Goth, I'm a big fan of her. She's not in a lot of like major films, but when she shows up, and she's been in multiple horror films before, and she always delivers, whether it's A Cure for Wellness from Gore Verbinski or Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria reimagining. She always delivers. She's pretty great. So I'm excited to see her in something like this. And then, as you were saying with Ortega, we'll talk more about her in Scream, but I was very impressed with her in Scream, and I'm glad to see that she's getting another. That's something I said to Reagan when the trailer for this showed before Scream, and I said it was pretty cool that she's like really kind of has her feet in a bunch of different, kind of realms right now. Whether even Scream is a major horror franchise, mainstream, whereas this film X is original, for lack of a better term, but it's a A24 more artsy horror film, and I think that's cool to see that she's kind of spreading that out. And I'll be curious to see what she does after this, if she can horror. I'm not saying horror she can't do just horror, but now that she has two pretty significant projects that are both horror films, and she's kind of going for this Scream Queen look, I think that'll be interesting to see what happens. And then of course Kid Cudi is in this. But yeah, I don't know. I really don't know what to make of this trailer. I feel like maybe there's something more to it than it's alluding to. Maybe it's just kind of
that's what I'm expecting, because like
yeah.
That's why I said the elevated horror, because like yes, it has the like OG slasher kind of simplistic look to it, but then there's the whole like the hosts, the reclusive elderly couple, like something we see that obviously something is up with this elderly woman. And
it reminds me of The Visit. M. Night Shyamalan.
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that, but it like it wasn't quite like Hereditary levels of like terror and like I don't know, like paganism, but just like there's some sort of like weird twist or element that's going to be looming with this woman. So
yeah,
it definitely was like a good teaser trailer to get me invested in this. Like it also, I feel like it didn't like, it's an A24 movie, but I feel like it's still kind of like, it didn't really like look like an A24 movie. I don't know if that makes sense, but like it just felt different than like, I feel like this could easily be like a Blumhouse type movie rather than an A24 movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think story-wise definitely gives that off. I mean, it's kind of hard to say what does an A24 movie look like because they have so many different movies. I mean, I would say, yeah, a lot of their movies, they look very, I don't know even know how to describe it. They look very, I mean, the thing here, the key aesthetic difference is this looks like a throwback. Like this looks like it's very much trying to give off the energy and the style of the era it's set in and trying to, it's inspired by Texas Chainsaw. So, the 70s. So yeah, it definitely looks different in that regard. I don't know if I've ever really seen it. Yeah, anything like this from A24. But again, this is just the first trailer. We'll see what the marketing is going a certain direction. I'm definitely curious to see it though, because even if it wasn't, subverting anything, and I think it will, but even if it doesn't, it still looks like it could be a pretty fun and like entertaining
right
slasher. So we'll see what happens. But it's nice to see there's something like this coming out relatively early in the year.
Right, March
And
18th, so not too
yeah,
far away.
exactly. So I'm keeping my eyes and ears open, keeping my not trying to get my expectations set on anything in particular, but I'll be down to support it.
If we can pull you away from the Batman, we can
Yeah, I'll be
check
on
out
watch
X.
number 5 that weekend, so I'll see if I can make it into my schedule.
Well, pre-Batman, there's another movie coming that also released a trailer this past week. That is Steven Soderbergh's Kimi, which is coming to HBO Max on February 10th. Quick rundown here. During the COVID-19 pandemic in Seattle, an agoraphobic tech worker discovers evidence of a violent crime while reviewing a data stream and is met with resistance and bureaucracy when she tries reporting it to her company. So basically, she has to find a way to solve this murder, and that includes leaving her apartment. And as an agoraphobic person, that's obviously not ideal. So this seems it's starring Zoe Kravitz, which I feel like is the biggest draw here. I'm not like a huge Soderbergh stan or by any means. I know like No Sudden Move was the most recent one, another HBO Max feature. But Logan Lucky, I have seen. That may be it. I actually haven't seen Ocean's 11, which obviously is like the big one. But anyway, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, because it seems basically like if you just put the plot, agoraphobic woman in-house witnesses murder, like that's The Woman in the Window, the movie with Amy Adams based on the book. That's literally like, except she's not a tech worker. She just watches people outside and saw her neighbor across the street get murdered. So it's very, very similar. This seems almost like I know it said it was like set during the pandemic, but it almost had like a dystopian type feel to it, like a futuristic element. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
Not really. To be completely honest, I have not actually sat down and watched this yet. I did see people talking about it online. Didn't really seem like it was my speed necessarily, but I'm not getting back to Soderbergh. I have nothing really good or interesting to say about him from the stuff that I've seen. I've seen not that many films. I haven't seen his best stuff. Again, in his defense, but I was kind of indifferent about Logan Lucky. I really didn't like Unsane. I think his more recent output has been very all over the place. I know he's very experimental, like tries to do a lot of different things, but it just the substance really isn't there for me. I get that the form and the everything else he's doing is different and interesting, from the regular mold that you might see, but I don't know. I like Zoe Kravitz a lot, so maybe I'll give this a chance. And of course, I'm excited to see her in the Batman, and it's cool to see her getting some other projects. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on this, because I loved The Woman in the Window book. The movie was awful. So there's premise the premise itself of like an agoraphobic woman witnessing a murder has promise based on the book of The Woman in the Window. So maybe this will just be like the adaptation of that book that we wish we had gotten, and it'll just come under a different title. But like I said, Zoe Kravitz is the biggest draw for me here. So maybe this will be a nice little warm up for the Batman, but we will see February 10th on HBO Max. So just under a month away, a couple weeks at this point. But the last trailer we can't even talk about because we haven't seen it yet. But it's worth noting that the Moon Knight trailer drops tonight as we're recording on Monday Night Football. So by the time you hear this, it'll already be out there in the wild. Rumored that the release date, I assume it'll be included in this trailer, is going to be March 30th, 2022. So that'll make it the first of the MCU series to hit in 2022. So 6 episodes, Oscar Isaac starring Ethan Hawke. We got like a little snippet of a trailer, which was like the teaser to announce that the trailer was coming. So I'm sure we'll break down the trailer more next week as we recap it. But I know this is one of the ones that you're more excited about, Johnny, as far as the MCU series go, just because it's your boy Oscar Isaac, and it's got Ethan Hawke in it. So those are two easy reasons to watch. But any thoughts on Moon Knight? I know, like I said, we haven't seen the trailer, so there's not much to discuss. But
not really. I'm pretty. I don't want to say skeptical. I'm just kind of burnt out with these MCU projects, to be honest. I didn't even watch Hawkeye. I don't know if I ever will. Probably not.
It's the best one.
Oh, brother. I don't know, man. I mean, I'm interested in it 100%. It's Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke. I think it has a darker tone, it seems like, and it's bringing in a new character that I'm not very familiar with in Moon Knight. So that has a lot of intrigue for me, and definitely is a different sort of anticipation versus something like Hawkeye or versus something like even WandaVision or some of these other upcoming shows they have, Miss Marvel, etc. So She-Hulk. So I don't know. I'm cautiously curious and optimistic. I think right now they have my curiosity, but the trailer will determine whether or not they have my attention.
I see what you did there. I will likely be watching regardless. But we'll see. Big trailer reveal tonight. So we'll get back to you next week with what the full potential of this show is. Shall we get down to business with our Scream review?
Let's do it.
All right. This is Scream 2022, the 5th installment in the franchise, the first one in over a decade. Last time in April of 2011 was when we got Scream 4. Now, we were talking about this. I know this answer now because we chatted about it before the podcast, but the people need to know. With a franchise that's 5 movies deep, something that's like as historic as the Scream franchise, what are our relationships with these movies? You know, is this a movie that we've been counting down the days until we get to see it because we've watched all 4? Is this something we're just approaching? For me personally, I only saw the first movie this past year in Halloween of 2021. It was the 25th anniversary of the original Scream, so I got to check that out. And I didn't know what to expect for this franchise as a whole. Before watching it, like I kind of expected. I didn't know the premise of like it being more of like a meta, self-aware type of horror movie. So like I knew of The Mask, obviously, and like that's all I had to associate it with. And so I just assumed like, oh, it's just another Freddy, another Jason, another like that era of horror movies. This obviously came a little bit later in 96 rather than in like the 80s with those original movies, or 70s with Michael Myers. But when I saw the movie, I was very impressed with it, and I love the like meta humor of the way that it takes the original one, like takes the rules of the horror movies and like literally talks about Freddy and Jason, and you're watching Halloween, the original Michael Myers movie, and talking about like, oh, it's always the love interest, it's this, it's that, like using that to kind of subvert and make the kind of critique and also embrace it all at the same time. So I was very impressed when I watched the first movie. And then I also didn't realize until watching this one, like I just assumed like, okay, you know how these things go, like the first one's always good, and then like 2, 3, 4, those are going to be like middle of the road, who they're fine. And so like by the time knowing that I was going to see the 5th one here, I didn't necessarily like have super high expectations, and then it came out pretty hot and it was getting good reviews. So I then got more excited to see it. We'll get into our thoughts on it here in a second, but I went back and was looking at 2, 3, and 4, and they're all like, I know Rotten Tomatoes isn't like the end all be all as far as whether something is a good movie, but like Scream 2, I want to say it was like, let me pull it up here. But Scream 2 was an 81% critic score. Scream 3 drops down to a 41%. And then let's see what Scream 4 is. Scream 4 is back up to a 61%. So like, obviously it looks like 3 was the low point. I haven't seen 2, 3, or 4. So I'm just going from 1 and 5. But I want to say 5 is coming in around 75% critic score. So long story short, what I'm trying to say is that like the franchise overall as a whole is better than what I thought it was like going in. I just kind of like made these assumptions, but it seems like they're overall pretty good. And based on the two that I have now seen, I would definitely back that up. So let me turn this over to you. What is your experience with the franchise? Was this something you were looking forward to? How many have you seen? Give us the rundown.
Yeah, so it is interesting that you're right to note the history with regards to the reception and general feeling toward every film in the franchise. It's pretty impressive. I can't really think of another horror franchise that is close to that. And there's a lot of them, from Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween. This one seems, and I think with the consistency here is most likely can be attributed to Wes Craven. He is
But also Wes Craven did Nightmare on Elm Street. So
yeah, exactly. But he only directed two of those, to be fair, and those are like the two best received ones: the original and then A New Nightmare, which it was like also similar to Scream in that it was a very meta take on the franchise. This is Wes Craven. He directed the original and he directed 2, 3, and 4. And of course, he's passed away since 4 came out in 2011. So he was not at the helm on this one, but it's dedicated to him at the end in the credits. And the two people that got to direct this, they directed Ready or Not, which I know a lot of people like, and I think
definitely
is generally regarded to be one of the better mainstream kind of horror films of the last few years, which is cool. I have not seen it yet, so I did not have that kind of any expectation based on their involvement. Definitely, it takes a lot from the original Scream and spoofs a lot of it and parodies it. But I was vaguely familiar and had seen a lot of the original Scream over the years here and there. And it's just so popular and is like a pop culture touchstone in a lot of ways that I was just kind of via osmosis alone picked up on a lot of the plot. But this weekend was really the first time I think that I've sat down, at least since as an adult, and watched it beginning to end. And it still holds up really well. It's fun. It's scary. It's genuinely tense and pretty thrilling and just fast paced and doesn't really let up. So, and the cast is great. I think that's the one thing, especially that movie holds, maybe over any of the other sequels, because I know not everyone comes back from that original film, of course. But I think it really does a good job of. It is self-referential and it is meta, and it is poking fun at the genre and even Wes Craven's own work. So it's a hard act to follow. I think I haven't seen the other sequels. I don't know if I really like the first one. Like I thought it was great, but I wasn't like, oh my God, this is like my new favorite horror movie or one of my favorite horror movies ever. It's really well done and I see why people love it, but I don't know if I loved it so much that I would really feel like I needed to pursue the other sequels necessarily, especially if they aren't quite on that level.
I sort of want to at this point after seeing 5, to go back and I mean, it's not like top of my list priority, but like now knowing that like, oh, these aren't like as bad as I thought they were just because it was like a horror movie sequel. But at least the second one, because in 5 they reference the Stab movies a lot, and like in the second one is like the premiere of the first Stab movie, so it's more of like a connection to, which is like obviously based off of like the events of Scream 1.
Exactly.
In this, within the Scream universe, Stab is Scream.
Exactly. So I think I had a general passing knowledge of the Stab movies and how that pans out through the sequels, but having not seen the sequels, I didn't have that full context. But you can figure it out just by listening and watching the movie. But yeah, that pretty much covers it with regards to the history of the franchise and just like my general knowledge and feelings. So going into this, fairly not knowledgeable, not blind by any means, but also not fully, understanding.
You weren't counting down the days until Scream hit theaters.
No,
but
definitely not.
Let's lay down the foundation of what we're working with here in Scream 5, which is just titled Scream. There's a good joke about that in the movie. So we've got the OGs back. We've got Neve Campbell. We've got Courtney Cox and David Arquette, the 3 main characters from the original Scream. We've got some newcomers as well. Melissa Barrera, who is in The Heights, Jenna Ortega, who we were just talking about with X, and she was also in You, Jack Quaid, Mason Gooding, Mikey Madison, Dylan Minnette, and more. There's a solid group of high school aged characters here, similar to the first one of just like this friend group where anyone could be the killer. Rotten Tomatoes currently has this at a 75% critic score, 85% audience score, so really well received across the board. And I was a big fan of this. I gave this 4 stars. This was an 83 out of 100 for me. So big surprise here to come out of the gates with something this high in January. So I am very pleased with what we got here. Johnny, what's your score?
I give this a real solid 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was really enjoyable for the most part, and pretty smart, not dumbed down, not like a big fall off by any means, I think, from what this franchise standard seems to be, or what the original standard seems to be. But it didn't like blow my socks off. I didn't think it was outstanding. I thought there were some weak points that we can touch on, but overall, again, I had a good time with it.
Well, let's get into the plot here real quick. I'm going to go ahead and throw a spoiler warning out there because this is like a murder mystery, a horror movie. So we have to be able to, I'm not going to say we're necessarily going to flat out spoil it, but you know, I don't want to be walking on eggshells to not spoil it in case we do need to get in there. But 25 years after a streak of brutal murders shocked the quiet town of Woodsboro, California, a new killer dons the ghost face mask and begins targeting a group of teenagers to resurrect secrets from the town's deadly past. So for those who have seen 2, 3, 4, the sequels, this isn't too far off from any sort of sequel. You know, it seems, you know, Neve Campbell has been in all of them. I think the main 3 have been in all of the sequels. So there's like some sort of event that brings the characters back to Woodsboro, and there's another killer, a copycat killer. And they even reference that in this movie, that like every 10 years or so, someone does this. But let's just get into thoughts on the movie here, because I know I just said that I was a big fan, and I think that this movie took the meta references, the self-awareness, all to like a new level, because it wasn't just like aware of the horror genre and the tropes and everything that goes into these movies, but instead it was also like to sequel culture, to reboot culture, to the current like filmmaking process. And like it did so in a way that was like, there were so many parallels to the original, even as far as like, you know, bringing the main characters back, but also like literally the exact house that was used in the first movie like is back. Like the premise is almost like make a comparison to like the way that The Force Awakens was basically just A New Hope all over again. I think my favorite scene of the whole movie was like when they were all sitting around in the living room, and the brother and sister were the ones who were like the movie buffs were like giving the rundown of like, oh, this isn't a sequel, it's a requel. You know, it's not quite a reboot, it's not quite a sequel. You've got to bring the originals back for the nostalgia play, but you also have to start like set up a new future with new characters. And like, it's hard not to think about like the Disney Star Wars sequels while you're doing this, or literally anything, any sort of like recent nostalgia bait, reboot, sequel, whatever you want to call it. And like the way that they talk about how the Stab movies did this, and like Stab 8 was just called Stab instead of Stab 8, and it's literally, while this movie is called Scream. They talk about like the Halloween movies, and you can't have a Halloween movie without Jamie Lee coming back. And then there's even my personal favorite was the line about Stab 8 was the one that the guy from Knives Out directed. So obviously referencing Rian Johnson. And then the internet fans were talking about how he made a character of Mary Sue, and that there's like all of this backlash about basically like they were taking everything that was like thrown at The Last Jedi, and like the toxic fandom and everything there, and relating it to the Stab movies and like making fun of it. So I thought that like the ability to kind of like incorporate all of that into still having like a solid horror comedy movie was a part of like was mainly what made this so fun. I don't know if you felt the same way as someone who is, we don't have to get into the Last Jedi argument, but someone who's on the other side of that.
No, I mean, I thought it was fun. I thought that the references were pretty apt. I like that it is so meta, and I liked the twins. I thought the twins were pretty endearing for the most part.
My book smart king, Mason
Yeah,
Gooding.
it was cool to see some familiar faces, but yeah, I like, and the Vertigo poster on the back and the other posters that they had up, I thought was pretty neat. But yeah, that whole monologue, and it was delivered like pretty damn well by that actor. I don't have her name like off the top of my head. I should probably pull it up, but she did a great job of like doing it, because it is a lot of like unwieldy information, and like you have to say it in a way that feels somewhat natural, and not just doesn't come off as completely like nonsense for people who might be not really familiar with these terms or like what they're talking about. Like if you're not like a film or movie like freak nerd weirdo like we are, then it might, that talking about all this stuff, it's like what does this even mean? I mean, you probably have a passing knowledge or understanding of what film culture like is like nowadays, because if you're at the movie theater watching this movie, you have seen some of these other movies they're referencing. But yeah, I thought it was done well and was pretty funny, and made some valid points, and that I think was the most important part. If you're going to go to that level, is to just make it seem worthwhile, seem like it makes sense to anybody who might be watching the movie. And I think that they did that. And you don't have to catch all the references or understand everything that they're poking fun at, but I think overall it gets the point across, and people were laughing in my theater, and I think that they generally got it. So that worked for me. And yeah, I think that those scenes where you sit down and you kind of lay out what exactly is going on, or what this is supposed to mean, what the rules are, that's kind of a key part of this franchise from what I can understand, and what the first movie laid down. So, and I loved the bits where they are like, they're watching the Stab movies, and it's recreating these original Scream.
The literal, when Mindy, that was the character's name who we've been referencing, the like movie buff, when she is literally in the house at the party watching the movie, and it is when the character is shouting at the movie that he is watching, which happens in the original one, when the character is watching Halloween, and he's like, oh, look behind you, he's behind you. And then that is happening in this movie within the movie, and Mindy is sitting there watching it going, look behind you. And then she looks behind her and she's like, oh shit, because the killer is literally about to get hurt. Like,
yeah, Jasmine Savoy Brown is her name. She was on HBO's The Leftovers apparently, which I haven't seen yet. But she was great. And that moment in particular was definitely a standout and funny and intense and had me on edge.
The way that they're like between that and like because it's Mindy again who's like, why didn't you ask me if I should come to the basement with you? It means that you're the killer, because you like,
yes,
the rule is like, don't go to the basement by yourself because you're gonna get killed. But then that girl went down there by herself because she was the killer, and so like she didn't have to be scared about being killed. And like the way that they like keep referencing like going down to the basement and like all of these like horror tropes, and that like everything is like, this is a group of characters who have grown up either living in a real horror movie or watching them like nonstop. That it's like all of us as fans that are like, it's like that commercial where it's like the fake horror movie, and they're like, should we go get in the car? No, let's go hide behind those chainsaws.
Yeah.
Like it's like if you made that into the full movie. That's what the Scream movies are.
Yeah, 100%. And I know we said we we're going to get into like full spoilers, but there is,
we can. I just didn't want to have to like, I didn't know if we were, but go ahead.
What did you feel? So a big part of this movie for me, of course, and I think all these movies, I would say to varying degrees, I would imagine if you're a fan, is being surprised or being fooled by who's actually the killer or killers. And I think for me, a large part of this movie, I was watching it, first 2/3 or so, I was like, okay, I like this movie, but I'm not really sure like some parts really they're kind of falling a little flat for me. I'm not sure if this is all going to really work into being like putting it over the top into like a good movie for me. Like I thought it was kind of middle of the road in some regards, but for me, I think the mystery of it all and being genuinely surprised by anything, especially in the end, had a lot of weight to it. And there were some genuine surprises, and I was kind of impressed, or like I thought it was clever where they took it, both literally and figuratively. So I'm just curious, like, what were you expecting? Did you feel that way at all? Were you surprised, or what were you thinking, like, actually while watching it, and then at the end in the third act?
Yeah, I mean, I knowing in the first movie, in the original one, that there are the two killers. I can't, Skeet and what Shaggy, whatever Shaggy's name was, Stu Mocker and Skeet. But the two of them, like, I didn't know, like, yes, in the original one there were two killers. I didn't know if that was going to be the route here. So like I kind of had the mindset that there was one, because I didn't know if it was going to literally just do the exact same thing as the first movie. And so like I don't know why I thought that, but like that was my thought process. So I was like, it can't be Richie, Jack Quaid's character, because he was literally with Sam when, like, out of town when the first attack happened. And I'm like, okay, it can't, like, I was like, kind of like, it can't be Sam because of that. But then like they kind of frame it like Amber is like coming on and trying to blame Sam. And then there's like, there's a whole lot of misdirection, and it does a really nice job of like setting it up like the original one, where anyone in the friend group could be. There's a sense of paranoia and conspiracy. And they even like do the whole thing of like, for a second, like, could it be one of the original three? Like, what could be happening there? And then like towards the end, they even come out with the curveball of the character Liv. That was the girl with the pink hair that was trying to get it on with Chad, Mason Gooding. But and then he's like, oh, I don't know if you're the killer or not. So and then she kind of like flips, and it's like, wait a minute, is that her? Like, so for me, it was very much like a waiting until the last second to see the reveal.
Right.
So I was pleasantly surprised with how it all unfolded. We'll talk about it. It's so the fact that it ended up being Mikey Madison's character, Amber, and then Richie, Jack Quaid's character, the out-of-town boyfriend and the best friend from the hometown. I mean, if I were the one who was like, oh wait, there's a killer on the loose, is it not the person who lives in the house where this all happened? Like, I feel like that would have been a suspicious point for me. I don't know about you, but how did you feel about the whole overall like meeting on the subreddit? And like it felt pretty like some of these like horror stories that you hear, like of like the radical, like, and she even plays the like the victim card and saying like, no, I was radicalized on the message boards, blah blah blah. Like I like it felt authentic.
Yeah, I bought that. So for me, so I knew pretty much all along watching this. Okay, so I've sat in the movie theater a lot in the last few months where this trailer was played, and I feel like I was so skeptical and so like down on it that I like never absorbed anything that, at least consciously, while watching it, because I was either not paying attention on my phone or I was like talking crap about it to Reagan or my family or whoever I was with. But so I don't know if they revealed any of this in the trailer or hinted at it, but like within the first 20 minutes or so, like once they got to the hospital to see Ortega's character, I was like, okay, the boyfriend's one of the killers for sure. I was like,
but then they do the whole like, Dewey tells them off the bat, like, it's the love interest, like it's this. And so like the way that it kind of like they bring that up almost to like eliminate that theory,
get you off the scent. Yeah,
right.
Well, yeah, so I thought it was him right away. And what really cemented it for me, so there's of course the first time that oh god, what's her name, I guess the main character, Melissa Barrera's character, the first time she gets attacked, it's in the hospital, and it's when the boyfriend is like coincidentally
Watching Netflix.
Yeah. And so he's unaccounted for, and they're right there in the hospital. And I'm like, okay, this is sus. But the thing that really cemented it for me, because they do, and it's intentional, of course, they follow the exact patterns of that original movie for this love interest. They point out that it could be him. There's a time where she gets attacked where he's unaccounted for. And then later on, what really cemented it was he gets attacked, but not to the point where he could die or is seriously injured. It's just he gets cut on the arm and he gets like knocked out. And so I was like, the fact that he's alive right now and doesn't seem like he's trying to stop. There's a moment also where it seems like he could help stop or try to get the killer while they're distracted. I'm like, this is it. Like he's definitely involved. The real thing was I couldn't figure out who the second person was. So what really elevated this movie a good bit for me, and kind of pushed it into the good category, was in the third act, the reveal that the house they're at for this party in the third act is the original house, Stu's house from the original Scream movie. And that Amber, I think was her name, she is the one, it's her house, she's the one that's in on it. And so I was like, whoa, when they do that shot where it like pulls out of the house, like through the front door.
And it twists at the angle. Yeah.
Yeah. The use of angles, the Dutch angles, the Canada angles were really well, I thought, utilized. And like those are used a good amount in the original from what I noticed as well. So I thought that was a cool way of kind of harkening back to that visual style that Wes Craven used. Yeah, just those little cues and like that reveal. I thought I was like, that was a moment where I was like, wow, I really didn't see that coming. Like they did a good job again, revealing that.
The only thing about like, this is just like a nitpick and me being dumb, but when you were referencing the attack, when Richie gets attacked in the hospital, and like the whole sequence where Dewey is killed as well, like, I'm sorry, but there's no way that was Amber under the hood at that point. Like that person was way too big to be this tiny little girl and like wearing the bulletproof vest and taking those bullets. That Dewey like shoots her 3 times in the chest, and like then she like basically like just guts him up the front and the back. And the way she was like tossing people around, I was like, okay, so this has got to be like Chad or something if he's got this kind of strength. But that's, I mean, that's a minute nitpick, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's not really a nitpick. I mean, that's a valid logical gap, I think. And I think you could really, again, I've only seen 2 of these movies at this point, but I think that's something you could maybe point to in the original as well, and probably could do it.
But like in the original, it was like both 2 like high school age dudes, you know, versus like one of these guys is like a more, at least a larger, I don't know about strength wise, you know, it's not like Richie's like jacked, but like one of them is like this small petite little girl, and then the other one is like a 20-year-old man, I guess. So like it's like you would see if you were to put the original like Stu and Skeet together, like they would both look pretty identical underneath the hood and the mask. But these true. 2, there would be 2 very obvious different killers.
Yeah, that is true. And so I think that like those things for me, because that's not the only, I think, scene where you could make issue with. I think when you have 2 killers and when you have them very differently, I think it knocks it down a little bit, just because some things you can overlook it and you can be like, it's, you know, it is what it is. But like, yeah, I think there are enough of those or things that just don't quite fit or make the most sense that I'm just like, it takes a little bit. It does detract a bit from the movie for me. But I still had a fun time with it. I still thought that the reveals were pretty good. I thought that the motive made sense, and I thought that the callbacks to the original were fun and made sense. And I was satisfied by the end of it, of what characters they killed, how they killed them, the characters that lived, and what the consequences were. And I thought those pieces mostly fit for me, I think. So I like that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. 2 things that I want to touch on. This kind of goes into like the meta-ness and like self-awareness of this movie. but there are so many moments when I'm particularly thinking of Wes and his death. That's Dylan Minette's character, when like after his shower, and he's like preparing dinner. But there are so many moments where it's like you're waiting and waiting for the jump scare, because like they play into it. He opens up the fridge and you're like, okay, in a normal horror movie, when he closes the fridge, that's when the person is standing behind him. Like you see it and he doesn't. Then he opens the pantry door, same thing. He opens the cabinet, same thing, and nobody is there. And so the way that they just kind of like play into like your expectations and when it should happen, I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
the second thing though is that this movie was such a like all-star cast of like, that person, at least for me, because we had, you already mentioned Mindy. I haven't seen The Leftovers, but so Mindy is well known from The Leftovers. Then we had again, outside of the original three, but even Rebecca, who hadn't seen the original one, was like, is that Monica from Friends? But Melissa Barrera from In the Heights, Jenna Ortega. It took me half the movie, but then I recognized that she was a main character in the second season of You. Then Dylan Minette being the 13 Reasons Why guy. Mason Gooding, the love interest from Booksmart. Mikey Madison, the killer from one of the Manson murderers from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which R.I.P. burned alive twice. Heather Matarazzo, that was the Chad and Mindy's mother who comes in. She was Anne Hathaway's best friend in the Princess Diaries movies. And then Jack Quaid, didn't know him from anything. He's Dennis Quaid's son, but he was like a dead ringer for Phineas O'Connell, Billie Eilish's brother. I thought that they looked like, I was so startled that I was like, does he act? So it was a lot of fun just kind of like picking these people out. And I think that makes it like, that was part of what made it like a good cast, because it was like people that I was familiar with separately, and they weren't necessarily like stars in their part, but I all of these people, I liked them from their respective projects. And so to kind of put them all together here, I thought the cast worked really well together.
I think that's true. They had pretty good chemistry and fit well. So I'm like 90% convinced that the reason they cast what's her name? Mikey Madison for Amber is so that they could just burn the shit out of her again in this movie.
The fact I was that like,
that's meta. Because, like that's meta right there.
Right. Like not only like, because the whole thing is like, okay, she got burnt alive in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then in this movie she gets burnt alive again here on the gas stove. But the way that they did it, where she's like, shoot him in the head, they always come back, or whatever, because that's what happens in the original one. You get that last, like, you think it's over, then you get that last final scare. And so they do it this time around to the one on the floor, and then even still, after getting burned alive, she comes running out of the kitchen, and then has to get pumped with a couple more shots. But
and I love that too, because it was the last shot was Jenna Ortega's character who blows her head off.
Right.
She pops in at the last second with the gun. So yeah, I thought that all worked. It was fun. The kills, it was very gory, much gorier than I expected. Which no complaints for me. I know some people may not like that as much, but I thought it worked. I thought it was fairly justified. And one moment that particularly stood out, we haven't touched on this at all, surprisingly, or at least I haven't, and maybe you have, Pat, and quickly, but the fact that Melissa Barrera, the main character, her dad was Billy Loomis. And she has these visions of her dad, her serial killer dead dad.
Right.
Like trying to provoke her, trying to get her to go ahead and do certain things throughout the movie. One of my favorite moments, and I wasn't like a huge fan of this character. I'm like kind of hot and cold with Barrera as an actor and her performance in this movie. I think overall it works fine, but the one thing that I really loved and that I think stood out was when she ultimately kills her boyfriend.
Almost makes Billy Loomis a good guy, but he's like a Force Jedi, like a Jedi ghost, who's like guiding her to
to kill this guy. Yeah. So, but she just goes absolutely ape shit with this knife and just stabs him over and over and over again. And there's blood going everywhere. And she looks like pissed and furious. And she has like everything going on. I thought that was really pretty nuts. And it definitely gave off, again, these guys directed Ready or Not. I haven't seen that movie, but I know by the end, the main character is just covered in blood.
Right.
And Melissa Barrera's character, Sam, she was definitely like drenched in it after this scene where she just went, unleashed her, I guess, her dad's side in some way. And she even kind of like acknowledges that or comments on it. Logic was all there, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. So when they reveal the parentage earlier in the movie, they start to allude to it. They say that their mom had sex with this guy in high school, and then they, I guess, broke up or like weren't together, or he died when she was born. This is Melissa Barrera's character. And it's revealed her dad was Billy Loomis, and they had been together, him and Sydney in the original movie had been together for like years by the time that they, he gets killed, and when the movie starts, or at least a year. And so I'm like, okay. So at first I'm like, is Sydney their mom? Like, I don't like, what? How is this?
Yeah,
I
thought I was waiting for some sort of like connection to one of them, maybe.
And then I was like, so because that timeline doesn't fit anyone except Sydney, like Prescott. And I'm like, okay, so she got pregnant, because again, I haven't seen the sequel, so I don't know about kids or any of that family stuff in those movies. I just have the knowledge of the first movie. So without those, I'm like, okay, so she got pregnant when they had sex in the movie, in the original, and then had this kid, and then she went on and had, got married and had another kid. And then they're like, oh, mom's away. She's like on a business trip in London or something. And this movie takes place like over the course of like a week or something. And not once
His mom does not
does
come
the
home.
mom, she doesn't show up on screen. She doesn't show up via phone call. We don't hear her voice. I mean, if your youngest daughter got brutally attacked and almost murdered, wouldn't you drop everything and spend as much money as was needed and do whatever you needed to do as quickly as possible to get back home and to be with your children? Like, I thought that was so sloppy and like confusing, and like the timeline didn't really make sense. That kind of like, that confused me right at the beginning. And then like, it took me until I think maybe Sydney showed up for me to realize like, okay, so this isn't Sydney's kid and this doesn't really make sense, but I guess I just have to go with it. And they never really, it's like the mom was just a non-factor, and like they're just alone the entire movie. And I didn't buy it. I didn't really get that. I thought that was such a sloppy and kind of lazy way to do it. I don't know, again, I don't really have an alternative, but I'm also not getting paid however much money they got paid to write this. So I just thought it is what it is. The original Scream movie, they get the mom is murdered before the movie even starts, and then the dad is, taken away, and there's a whole kind of subplot with that. But that's why that works. It's a subplot that actually has an intention and actually ties in and has a resolution and a payoff. Whereas here it was like, okay, this is just, I guess, how they want to set it up, and it doesn't really matter. Don't think about it too much. But again,
I'm curious though, because they have said that there are plans for a Scream 5. So I don't know if that's something that would be like woven in.
Yeah.
Or sorry, yeah, Scream 6. So I don't know if that's something that is like intentionally left, because like I'm looking right now on a Entertainment Weekly, like our 5 burning questions and theories after Scream, and one of them is like, who is the mother? So maybe that is intentional, that like this is someone, because it's referencing the same sort of thing about like her last name is Sam Carpenter, which is, again, assumingly just like a reference to John Carpenter and Halloween, because there's a ton of those like sort of nods throughout, Billy Loomis being Dr. Loomis from Halloween. But this is just like a theory that it's like some unnamed character from credited as cheerleader in bathroom from the original Scream, who could potentially be, she said, it says, we hear her call Sydney's mom a slut, but is her sex negative criticism simply masking her own affair with Billy? So I don't know if that's a very if that's a very solid theory here, but it's people are speculating. So I hope this is not just like okay, we don't need to go into it, but instead something that maybe could be a future element here.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, overall, good time. I liked it.
Indeed.
More than what I expected. And I think, especially for a January movie, a solid start to the year.
I'm with you. This was a good time. Like I said, or like you said, good time, a lot of fun. Rebecca came with me, hadn't seen the original one, but was able to enjoy this and have a good time with it as it being just like its own, even though it was a requel, you don't necessarily have to have all of that extended knowledge, and they do a good job of breaking it down if you don't, but plenty of comedy, thrills, horror to entertain you, even if you are a newbie. So I think it did its job. This is, like I said, 4 out of 5 stars for me. I gave it 83 out of 100. Johnny, a little bit lower at 3.5 out of 5. But any final thoughts here before we wrap this up?
No, man, I think that pretty much saddles it. I think if you're a fan of the franchise, I don't think you'll be disappointed by this. In fact, I'm sure you've already seen it by now if you're a fan. But if you're not comfortable going to the theater right now, definitely give it a look when it comes out on VOD or is available to buy, because it's a fun. And even if you're not necessarily the biggest fan, I think you could probably. Do you think you could still watch this without having seen the others, or maybe as someone who's only seen the first one, and I think that's definitely the most popular one, I think you could get away with just seeing that one. But I think if you haven't seen any of these, it's going to be a little maybe too confusing or not as satisfying. So I would say at least watch the first one.
Well, like I said, Rebecca came with me to see this and hadn't seen the original one. So she was like, I basically was like, that's the original girl. That's this person. Like, and that's all I didn't have to like give her any sort of like Wikipedia summary. And she was able to still enjoy it. So I think if you're just a fan looking for a good, funny, scary movie to check out, that it's worth the watch, even if you aren't like a Scream franchise fan. So
yeah. All right. Fair enough.
Solid stuff. Well, thank you all for tuning in and week out. We appreciate the support, and we would not be able to do this without you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening and staying tuned. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube. And you can find all those accounts at Inside Film Room.
And while you are at it, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, The Rewind. You can find that on our website, on our social media pages, so you can get all of our stuff delivered directly to your inbox once a week. And be sure to rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Amazon, Apple, wherever you can get a podcast. We are there. And be sure to come back next week for another episode. We will see you then.